Kyle Poe, how are you this afternoon?
Doing great. How are you, Ted?
I'm doing awesome. This is actually the third podcast I've recorded today.
Wow.
Yeah, today's a busy day. Normally I do, like one a week, but we had a ton of travel in the late fall, so we burned through our backlog. Normally we keep a big backlog, so I'm rebuilding the pipeline again, so to speak. Um, well, it's great to have you on. You and I got to know each other before back when you were still in the law firm side. You've now moved to the vendor side, and it's great to finally have you on the show. We got a great agenda. Before we jump in, why don't you just do a quick introduction, tell us who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Sure. So Kyle Poe, VP of Legal Innovation and Strategy here at Legora. So former practicing attorney. I practiced law for 14 years, most of which at Morgan Lewis, where I was an associate and then a partner there. My practice was primarily mass tort and product liability litigation, but I also dabbled in labor and employment as well as just other commercial litigation. Really early in my career, I got involved in the tech side of legal practice, so building custom technology solutions internally at Morgan Lewis, which led me ultimately to using AI at the firm and using it for my own practice. I got to see firsthand how powerful AI was, and that gave me the conviction that this was really going to be a game changer. I had been doing legal tech and building software in the firm for a decade, and nothing before that was as powerful or as compelling as AI had been. And it really, I wanted to be part of this wave, and so I decided to leave at that time and go on to the vendor side, as you said, led me to here at Legora. And what I do here is I work with customers to help them, understand the technology as well as adapt it for their own practices as well as their own business. So really thinking about the future of legal practice and how this is changing not only what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, but also kind of the next level in terms of how they're reshaping their pricing, their packaging, their delivery of legal services using AI.
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't see many partners that make the transition into the tech side of the business. Like, what drove that? Was it just your passion?
Yeah, I mean, I had seen, there have been a couple of us who have made that jump. I think it is unprecedented, but I think we sort of live in unprecedented times. Is AI? There's nothing like AI in terms of the breadth of experience. I had been doing innovation internally, as I said, at the firm, and I did it originally for my own mass tort practice, and then got a reputation as being like the tech-enabled lawyer, and so people would come to me. I would speak to partners throughout the firm, and they would ask like, "Hey, can you help?" And I had built up a team of data analysts and engineers and developers, a team of about 10 by the time I left, and so I had resources to deploy. But most of the time, when I would talk to partners, and I would ask them, "Okay, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? How's your business structured? What are your associates doing? Your mid-levels doing? What are your pain points?" Most of the time, like 90% of the time, I would come back to them and say, whatever I'm building, which is a lot of databases, matter management, statistical analytics, most of those approaches, kind of pre-gen AI technologies, weren't really adept at helping the vast majority of the partners that I would talk to. And so for the most of the time, I would just tell them, yeah, what I have and what I'm able to do isn't really going to make huge impact for your practice. Basically, before Gen AI, for you to have a good use case using pre-Gen AI technologies, you needed to have a practice that had a lot of repeatability to it, that had a lot of scale to it. Often you needed to find a practice that already sort of had the right business model in place, say like a fixed fee or alternate fees or contingency fees, for it to really make sense to deploy pre-Gen AI technologies. And so when Gen AI came out and I started using it, it was just so clear. I mean, look, computers learn to speak English. They learn to speak natural language for the first time with Gen AI and LLMs. And the basically those 90% of partners I spoke to who I could no longer help or I couldn't help before, all of a sudden I was in a position to go back to them and tell them, the time is now. The technology is advanced to that point. And so I was ready to go all in. I think others, and this is back in 2023, 2024 timeframe. Not everyone was so sold on the technology. I think there was, especially at that time, the initial knee-jerk reaction of a lot of clients was like, "Don't use Gen AI." There's a lot of fear, I think, early on, whereas I was leaning in, and so it just became clear that if I wanted to have the impact the broad impact that the moment demanded, that it would be outside the firm at that point.
Interesting. Yeah, and your days inside the firm, you had a big part in the extranet that Morgan
Yeah,
Lewis kind of built their own custom extranet platform on SharePoint,
that's right.
correct? Yeah. Was that
Yep.
SharePoint on-prem or SharePoint Online?
Yeah, it was originally on-prem,
Okay.
and I think we eventually moved to SharePoint Online.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of how you and I got connected was your experience around that. I've spent the last 17 years in the legal collaboration space. Started in 2008 with a company called AcroWire, and we did a lot of time and materials consulting, building custom solutions like the one that you guys built in house. Most firms don't have the chops, or the personnel to deliver on an engagement like that. Morgan Lewis being a big firm obviously did, but yeah, you learned a ton in that process. And then your current role, you've kind of translated that and helped them with their portal product, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about kind of what the thinking was with portal and where you see it going.
Yeah, so Labora was, from the early days was envisioned to be a collaborative AI workspace for lawyers where, you could collaborate initially internally within a firm, so you could share it between different teams who work in a firm, share content more broadly. As we were working with firms to develop we created workflows that came out earlier this year, and the ability to kind of automate multi-step workflows using AI and these like fully agentic experiences. As we were building that out for our clients, for our customers, they began asking, this is really cool, this is really awesome that they have these experiences, and they were wondering if they could share that with their clients directly. And as we, broadly speaking, the way we see it is at a couple of fronts. One is that, AI is changing the speed of delivery, right? So the responsiveness that a firm can be now is far greater than they ever could have been before, just because the time of, performing certain types of legal tasks, particularly things like, first pass reviews or things like due diligence, these kinds of tasks are being accelerated greatly. And as you're able to complete these tasks a lot faster, clients expect faster, more responsive delivery of those services. And something like email, which is really what most of us are competing against, right? So email is by far the dominant way that lawyers and clients collaborate today. Like that's the big competitor out there is just email and like kind of the status quo. And so that was maybe a suitable format when it took a month to do a due diligence. Having the results come to you in a static Excel spreadsheet maybe was a suitably slow delivery mechanism and suitably advanced mechanism for that kind of legacy work performed in a legacy manner. But once you can complete that work within a matter of days or within a day now, and have it be performed by AI and then double checked by attorneys, clients expect a quicker, and a more enhanced service and delivery of that work product. And so now you're delivering the work product, directly through a portal where they can then interact with the work product, right? So they can then use AI to then ask questions of that work product. And so it just creates this overall better experience for the customer.
Yeah, and I, you and I had a conversation about kind of where Legora Portal fits into the bigger picture, and I think the capabilities that Legora Portal provides are a very narrow but important slice of the big picture. I shared a graphic with you. I can share it quickly on the screen. Most people listen to this podcast. They don't. Actually, I might not be able to. Let's see here. Just to kind of put in context where I see Legora Portal playing, which is really in that kind of practice space where, intake, document Q&A, playbooks, co-authoring, drafting, shared tabular review, all those sorts of things are very practice of law specific. And I see that as a necessary but still fairly narrow slice. I expect that slice to get bigger over
Yeah.
time as AI's capabilities grow and more work from the practice gets fed, becomes tech enabled. Um, but when we were at TLTF Summit, you guys announced Portal like I don't know 2 or 3 days, and everybody's like, "Hey, are you worried about your extranet product?" And I was like, "No, these things are really complementary. If anything," and I wrote an article about it on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
I'm actually excited that you guys and then Harvey later announced shared spaces. I'm excited that there's real money being put into this collaboration space because it's been so badly neglected. And
Yeah.
you know this because you helped build a tool to facilitate it. It's been so badly neglected that there's very little overlap with what we do, really very little to anything in the practice of law space. We're more focused on the broader relationship, like open and closed matters, historical, legal spend, um, attorney profile information that are billing time to the matters, the legal team, all of that sort of stuff, model document sharing, more kind
Mhm.
of business of law stuff. So, yeah, I was actually excited, but the reason I wrote that article, I was shocked at how many people got confused by thinking that what you were doing competed with us. And these were I had a couple former high Q guys ask me this. And I'm
Mhm.
like, dude, you know what? You understand the landscape. I'm surprised that you think so.
Mhm.
Anyway, we're glad to see you guys come in and actually in Harvey too and put some investment here because it's been a badly neglected space.
Yeah, I think that, especially as somebody who, I mean, I first got involved in extranets really early in my career. I had an impact where I own practice using them and delivering, providing client reporting through these portals, so the clients can understand what we were doing, like with the results that we were getting for our clients. So like communicating to them the substantive results of our practice. And certainly, I think that the adoption though of portals or extranets, as like oftentimes they're called, has been fairly limited, right? It's been, I mean, basically a little bit more advanced than a secure file transfer in a lot of instances. And so the potential, I think a lot of people have seen for a long time, myself included, like we saw robust potential in these client collaboration portals and in the enhancing the collaboration between law firms and their in-house counsel. But it's never lived up to that potential, and I think that I never even the things I did more Lewis, like it just we barely were scratching the surface. So I think that when I look at that pie chart you presented, I think it's probably more or less accurate as to where portals are today. I think that you're absolutely right that like portals today are not delivering, people really aren't delivering a lot of legal services, a lot of final work products. Certainly they're not creating new service lines, right? Like self-service legal service, service delivery through portals today. Very little of that's being done, particularly at the in the am law space. So there's so much more upside. I think you're going to see a couple of things. One is you're going to see that pie grow, right? The demand for portal services, both on the business of law and the practice of law side, is going to skyrocket, right? Like again, just because we're so early days. And then I think also just because practice of law has been such a small portion of what that is historically, if that's going to grow. And I think AI is going to be the thing that drives that, right? Like I said earlier, it's going to be one, just you expect to see better experiences, like email is no longer suitable in an age of AI, where clients know that their firms are using AI throughout the process to accelerate delivery. And then as firms are going I think the next step though is as firms are productizing legal services, right? So this is kind of the big conversation I'm having the most with like management committees and managing partners of firms is what's on the horizon. The idea that AI is going to disrupt certain things, that it's going to change, you won't be able to build like, when you can take that due diligence from 30 hours to 1 or 2, you can't charge 30 hours anymore, right? Like you can maybe charge 2. Or better yet, you reprice that work, right? You say, hey, it's no longer be doing, the value of the work, maybe that correlates to the 30 hours, but now that it's 2 hours of attorney time, the value to the client is still substantial for that work. And it's not really reflected by those 2 hours. Like the metric has kind of gone out of sync for the value that's being delivered to the client. And so you then want to reprice that work. Also, it doesn't account for the fact that you had to take, procure legal technology. It didn't account for the time and time materials to build out the AI workflows that you're using. And so you need to capture that value somehow. And so if you reprice that work on say a fixed fee basis or on like a subscription fee basis, you're then able to, you productize these things. And so as firms are seeing kind of what's on the horizon, what's really inspiring to me is that a lot of management committees are asking, like, how can we self-disrupt, right? Like, they don't want to be caught off guard and wake up one day when the phone stops ringing and realize the phone has stopped ringing, or wake up one day and realize that they've been undercut, on an RFP because their competitors are offering stuff on a fixed fee basis and they haven't done the groundwork, right? They haven't learned the technology, they haven't built out their workflows, they haven't productized their legal services, and so they're like caught off guard. And so a lot of them are being proactive. Now, obviously, I'm talking to more proactive firms, the ones who have their heads completely in the sand about this, probably aren't taking my calls or aren't picking up the phone to call me. So I am talking to the more forward thinking firms, but a lot of them are going that next step and really asking from the top down, asking, the management committee is thinking about this, and then they're asking their partners, like throughout the partnership, kind of on a partner by partner basis, what are you doing to rethink pricing, packaging, and delivery of legal services in light of AI? One firm that I was talking to did that was particularly interesting is asking that as part of like their year-end partner evaluations, right? So at the end of every year, you have to do like a self-evaluation as a partner or a questionnaire, and they'll ask questions like, "What have you done for continuity, business continuity? Like, what have you done this year to ensure that if you were to leave the firm, or if you were to win the lottery or something, that retire, that other people will be able to continue carry the torch forward." So that's kind of a typical question they would ask, and now they're asking, what have you done with AI, right, in order to rethink legal services pricing, and they're getting ahead of things and productizing that. And then the way once you productize things, meaning you take your knowledge and experience of your firm and you embed it into reusable workflows that are AI powered. You then have to deliver those somehow, and you could just have it be. One option would be to have it just be something that's available to the associate, and the associate pulls the lever and then emails the work product, but clients know that you're just pulling a lever and they don't want to really, it's not a great experience. And there's just so much more we can do in terms of like interactive experiences. The ability to ask follow-up questions, to be able to provide like a due diligence in this tabular review, which you can do with Legara, which is this interactive spreadsheet like experience where you can go into each cell and you can see what the AI's reasoning was. You can see an audit log of when the AI generated the answer, the associate who signed off on that answer. So to be able to have that kind of level of transparency into the work product is something that we weren't able to have before. And so yeah, as they're rethinking productizing, a lot of them are looking at the portal as a way to deliver these new legal services directly to their clients.
Yeah, and you and I talked a little bit about like why is it that such little sophistication has made its way into these client-facing portals? And I think it's a combination of two things. I'm curious your take on this. I think that just inherently, law firms are reluctant to share. They don't want to overshare, and that's a very
Mhm.
lawyer mindset, right? And it's a good one from a legal perspective, right? Additional information that's not essential can create liability, right? In a legal context. Um, and so law firms have they have a natural stance of being conservative on what they share. And then clients haven't really demanded it. Like, we compete primarily with HiQ, and the number of like basic file sharing sites that we see, it's probably 4 or 5 to 1 in terms of anybody doing anything sophisticated with it. And, their architecture is very much kinda isolated, and it made a lot of sense, like, when HiQ first came out, the cloud was big and scary to law firms, so they had to do a lot of work to ring fence and isolate, and that is really what allowed them to grow so quickly. But now that firms are comfortable with the cloud, and all the big am law firms are either there or making their way there, that additional friction, that air gap now makes it challenging when firms want to build integrated experiences. Like when we show a client relationship page, we deploy in the client's tenant, so we can tap into their practice management solution, their DMS, experience management, again, rich attorney profiles for everybody that's spending time to those matters. We can pull into their analytics and show law firms never share WIP, but legal spend over
Mhm.
time, all of these sorts of things. And, the current model, the current incumbent in that space, the architecture makes that challenging. So we see a lot of opportunity there to do things differently. But what is your take on why it's been just file sharing? Is it those dynamics, or are there other ones?
I think that's a good point. I think that probably the biggest reason is that the attorneys themselves aren't in those systems, right? So, they're certainly going to be reluctant to grant access to, to a platform that they're not themselves actually using on a day-to-day basis. Because the I mean, like the protection, it can't really be overstated how sacrosanct like the attorney-client relationship is to partners, how protective partners can be over those relationships. Because obviously they're the lifeblood of the firms, but they're also the lifeblood of the individual partners, who were working on them. And so, ensuring that that you control the narrative is very important to clients. Like you said, work in progress, like showing them stuff like was incomplete. You don't want them to kind of see your internal impressions, right? Like you might have an associate who was working on a draft, and you would want to show like, and they're like, oh, is this really what we want, or what about this other counter argument? And that might not be the narrative that you ultimately want to present to the client, and so it can cause uncertainty in your analysis if you inadvertently share certain materials to a client. So I think there's a lot of protection around that relationship. And so when you add to the fact that like all the systems you're mentioning of integrating and being able to display, the partners themselves aren't really in those platforms. I think what's changed, at least for Legora, is that we actually have partners and associates like you're in Legora daily, right? And so it's not we're not coming from the outside and going to a partner and saying, hey, we want to share your content, your work product with your clients, and you're not using it. They know it's the partners and the associates who are using Legora who are saying, hey, we have this work product. Is there a way that we can control how we share this with our clients, right? And so, and I would distinguish the kind of the two use cases of, we have a final work product and we want to share that with the client and introduce them to the workspace versus like the more self-service productized legal services themselves, as they're rethinking the service delivery, making that obviously if it's self-service, you need some place where the clients are going to come in to perform the legal services or to have it be performed. But in both instances, it's the attorneys, partners, the associates are already in the platform using it, and then they want to introduce clients to that environment. So they're already comfortable with the environment. They just want to be able to know exactly, and this is from a product design perspective, what's really important, to make sure that as we're building this product, that it is absolutely crystal clear what's being shared with the client at all times, so that the partners feel comfortable. They're already comfortable in the environment. Now they're comfortable with, okay, they know exactly what they're sharing, with whom, and what the clients can see. And so, we allow them, for example, if you're sharing a workflow with clients, you can have them just see the output, but not see the reasoning. You can have them see the reasoning and the output, but not the prompts, right? Like, so we allow that granular control, which is particularly important as they productize their legal services, because they're basically taking their hundreds of years, or decades of knowledge and experience they have representing. I mean, there's a reason why top tier firms command a premium in the market. And one of those is that the cumulative experience they have handling a certain type of work. And so they're taking that and they're embedding that into technology, into these workflows. And so they don't, that's becomes their IP, right? They're taking something that was in somebody's head and they're embedding it into a workflow, and it is now firm IP that the firm wants to protect and needs to protect. And so to be able to ensure that as they're sharing the workflows, so the work can get done, client can come in and say, run a contract playbook through the Legora portal. The client can have the playbook be run, and they can get the output from Legora, but they don't necessarily see like the playbook itself that is like the IP of the firm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, how should customers think about Legora clients or other vendors' clients when they make systems client facing and they decide to pivot at some point, right? Like they want is there operational risk that they need to think about? Like, well, what if you, like, let's say you're a Legora client today and you share through Legora portal, a client really likes it, and let's say the partner wants to switch to another platform, or Like, how do you get that kind of pushback? Like, hey, if I show this to my clients and we're getting hitched here, do you ever have those sorts of conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's an interesting question. So I think it highlights the importance of vendor selection, right, and like vendor durability. I think one question that does come up in the legal tech space right now. There's a lot of players. It's every year at ILTA or at Legal Week. There's tons of new players in the market, and with an industry that's happening so fast, or everything's happening so fast, and there's so many new market entrants in terms of new legal tech companies popping up all the time. And we're now starting to see some of them disappear, and it causes a concern, obviously, on the part of firms as well as their clients about vendor durability and who they want to work with. And we're particularly where we've been thus far, I think, has been there's it's been quite flexible, I think, in terms of like, if you're talking about just like a basic AI legal assistant, there's not a lot of risk or switching costs there. But as we really look to the future, and as firms look to embed their knowledge experience into workflows, they have to be. It's incredibly important that they go with vendors that they trust. I mean, we're basically asking customers to help us build the future of legal practice together. And as we do that, it's very important who they select to build that future. And obviously, there are a couple of things that clients or customers look to when deciding among vendors. I think financing is one of them. You want somebody who's not, who has sufficient capital to stand the test of time. Lawyers are notoriously peer obsessed. So, looking to their peers and seeing what other firms are going with, it gives them a lot of like confidence in terms of moving forward. But I think that the answer really is that just we're going to build the future together with these firms. And ultimately, if they're successful, we're going to be successful. And the hope would be is that if they're successful, there's not going to be a need for them to move to another platform. What they're hoping to achieve out of this, in a lot of instances, is client stickiness.
Mhm.
So they're hoping to entrench the customer, their client relationships via these tools and via these technologies. If they are the go-to platform for, like, if you create like a self-service labor and employment portal for a client, and the client in-house counsel is using it daily to assess HR, to do compliance, to do customer investigations, to do reductions in forces, right? Like all these different aspects of labor and employment practice. If that can all be channeled through something like the Labora portal, you're going to create incredible client stickiness with that platform. And you wouldn't want to move at that point.
Yeah, and you had experience when you were on the law firm side with kind of like it's interesting how many so we don't have a ton of competition, thankfully. On the intranet side, we had one competitor that's really kind of gone from the marketplace for the most part, and we're the only it's either us or custom dev. On
Mhm.
the extranet side, there's an incumbent in that space, which I talked about earlier. Um, and it's really I see customers debating, do we buy it or build it? And it's such a easy like we spent 14 years as AcroWire building with law firms, and the ability for us to take what we built and hand over to them where they could manage the care and feeding and the enhancements and the support and the training and keeping their ear to the ground for any integrations that would implement breaking changes. Like it's such a high bar. And a lot of times law firms will go, oh, but it's only going to cost me 600,000 to build this thing out. And I'm like, yeah, that's the part that has a discrete beginning and end. It's the
Mhm.
ongoing costs that really drive TCO. Sometimes 4 to 5x your initial development costs. So like it blows my mind that I still have to have those conversations, but the reality is I do because some firms have dev teams and guess what? Devs love to dev, right? I did. I used to be a developer. And that's what you want to do. You want to flex those muscles. But like I don't know, do you run into how do you, in your experience not just today with Legora, but like How have you thought about that problem, kind of build versus buy in the law firm context?
Yeah. So, when I started, really 2013, like started working with firm IT, the legal tech market was not as mature as it is today. So, I mean, you guys, Infodash was not around at that time. So there if I were to start down this journey today, or if there were an associate at a firm who were to start down the journey today where I was, like, there's no world in which they would have built the software internally. Not to say you wouldn't do some internal development. I think there's absolutely a role for certain types of development within firms, even today. But you certainly wouldn't have built out like, the matter management platform as I did. What we would have done instead is we would have got one of the, top tier matter management type platforms that exists on the market that are fully customizable. We would have bought that and we or licensed that, and then we would have just customized. I mean, like that's the if I were to advise somebody today, that's the route you go down. You don't build a fully customizable, you don't internally build customizable matter management platform yourself, because you could. I mean, you could, but it's not. There's just too many options now. So the calculus has changed from a decade ago. Now there's lots of great solutions in the market. Certainly, as I said, I did the extranet platform at Morgan Lewis, and today it wouldn't make sense to do that. Infodash wasn't in the extranet space at that time, right?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't make sense to do that today. I do. It's interesting you say devs like to dev. That's absolutely true. And the flip side of that is they don't really like to do maintenance and support.
No.
That's they want to work on the new thing and they don't want to tend to the legacy stuff. So that creates certainly like it increases the total cost of ownership of these tools. And of course, if you build something fully custom, you're almost wedded to the people who built it, right? Because those people are the only ones who know how that system operates. And it's difficult to you can't just go off the street and find somebody who knows how to do it. Whereas, like, if you were to just take a non-legal example, if you were to build like a custom solution on top of Salesforce, there's a whole marketplace of people out there who have Salesforce dev skills, who could support your application if somebody were to leave your company. There's certainly lots of downstream implications of doing custom dev. The stuff that does make sense, in terms of custom development in firms, integration work makes a lot of sense, given that each firm's systems, even if they use like say one of the leading time and billing systems, or the each one is so customized to each firm. The amount of complexity there is something that most people, unless you've been kind of on the database side of things, you don't know how complicated like time and billing systems are really, like the matter practice management systems inside of firms. Each one is highly bespoke to that firm. And so the work that you need to do to say integrate a new business intake platform with another like matter management system is highly specific, is not something you're going to be able to find off the shelf. So that kind of work really makes sense. We do have the conversation, kind of today in my role where I'm talking with firms all the time, and I will show them, I'll show them something you can do with Flagar, and they'll say, "Oh, well, yeah, we built that." And then of course I ask them like, "Well, how long did it take you to build that?" And they'll say, "Oh, well, it took us like 4 months, and we did it like a year ago." And it's like, awesome. That probably that was something Lagora didn't do a year ago, but today I did it in Lagora in an hour. And so if once things become commercially available, right? Like once you can use commercial software and you can just take off the shelf commercial software and customize it to meet your use case, it no longer makes sense to dedicate development resources internally to reinvent the wheel. Instead, it makes sense to dedicate those resources to things that are highly practice or matter specific that you wouldn't be able to find commercially available. Things that and then it makes sense to integrate those with a platform like Lagora, via something like MCP, right? So that way we can handle sort of commercially available use cases, document review, document extraction, things like word adding. We can build things like great user experiences, interfaces, and permissioning and security and all those kind of tasks that aren't necessarily the most exciting. And then firms can focus on what sort of is their competitive advantage, which is their knowledge and experience, right? And so they can focus on building technology that really lends to their own strengths, and let us in the tech vendor space, let us build great software.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. How do you think firms what is the differentiation equation going to look like, 5 years from now, right? Like, you can't buy an off the shelf solution and differentiate yourself based on that tool. You really kind of have to, I have a theory about this that law firms are going to, their special sauce is all of the knowledge and documents that created winning outcomes for their clients, right? And how do they use that in a wholesale way today? Like Legora is a hosted solution, right? You're kind of bringing your data to AI versus bringing AI to your data. Like how are firms going to differentiate themselves? Because again, off the shelf tools by themselves aren't going to do it. Maybe it's through the workflows that you're talking about, but yeah, how is firm A going to differentiate from firm B 3 to 5 years from now?
Yeah. So I think what you're getting at though is that there's kind of a short and a long term. So in the short term, there is some early mover advantages of people who, who lean into the tools, not just licensing it, but like who really get up to speed and integrate the tools throughout their firms today, right? Because they have a strategic advantage over their competitors, say at trial, because they're using AI and their competitors aren't using AI. But certainly, once this kind of short term, once everybody has Legora, for example, right, and it's become the incumbent solution or has some other tools, it won't be. You're right to say that you can't. There won't be a competitive advantage because everybody has it, right? I mean, so this will be sort of like if we go back and kind of by analogy, there were some competitive advantages early on with, say, electronic legal research, right? Early on, if you were a firm who leaned into electronic legal research, you were able to do more comprehensive legal research than your competitors were. That then gave you some strategic advantages at trial because you were able to find that one case that was on point, or that case that rebuts what your, that distinguished the precedent on which your opponent was relying, and so you're able to you gain a strategic advantage through that. But that then became very quickly because it's like a very competitive market. Once you're using it, once kind of the cat's out of the bag on electronic legal research, everybody's doing it. It just becomes the new normal. Like everybody has to do it. So there's no longer really any competitive advantage to using electronic research. It's just the baseline, right? And so in some ways, that will be the case with AI as well. Is that like it will just become the new baseline? In the meantime, though, those firms that lean into it will, do have a chance to get ahead and to take advantage of the to kind of seize the moment and get ahead. So I think that what will be their competitive advantage? I mean, the good news in some ways is that it won't be the software, right? Like if they don't have to worry about like once everybody has AI and once they've it's been the law schools are teaching it and all the associates know it and the partners are using it on a day-to-day basis, it won't be the tech that you buy that's going to be your competitive advantage. It's going to go back to being the core things that you went to law school for, right? The core things that firms use to differentiate today, which is like their people, their experience, their knowledge, their work product, their relationships, their brand, like those core things they use to differentiate themselves today. Those will be the enduring things that remain once AI has kind of reshaped the landscape and however it's going to do it.
Yeah. And the what about like the amount of services that inside teams are going, work that once went to a law firm that they're going to manage internally, um that is going to displace a certain amount of law firm revenue. And that's not a Legora problem or a Harvey problem. That's the tech, right? The
Mhm.
tech is going to do this, and law firms just need to come to grips with, you know, I think there are credible estimates that 30% of associate hours today are gone, right? Based on where the tech is today, you can take 30% of associate hours and essentially tech is going to be delivering on that. It doesn't matter if it's your platform or the platform down the street. So firms kind of have to move up the value chain, which creates a lot of other challenges. Like, well, that's kind of how you train lawyers, right? Right? Is the grunt work. You throw them in a room with a box of documents and you review them, and you have a partner parachute in and provide guidance. And this tech kind of blows that all up. So it creates challenges like, okay, the leverage model, associate development, um, potentially having a revenue impact. Do you think that there's sufficient? Because when I talk to some people, they point to Javon's paradox and go,
Yeah.
"There's a ton of unmet need, and that's going to more than offset." And that could be true to a certain extent, but demand isn't infinite, right? So it's unclear at this point how far up the complexity spectrum AI is going to make its way and how fast. Like, we don't know the answers to that. In
Hmm.
fact, when you talk to credible sources at Frontier Labs today, they've kind of reached their limits on scaling, right? Like, we've consumed all the publicly available data that's out there, and just throwing more parameters at a model is starting to have diminishing returns. So there's a lot of talk about, like, us entering into a new age of research where, scaling sucked the air out of the room for like the last 4 years, and there really wasn't an emphasis and resources placed on research and new approaches around engineering. Now with inference we have a path to make things better, but even there I feel like we're do you think we're going to need a new are LLMs going to be the answer in 3 to 5 years? Do you see the trajectory? And I know it's hard to say for sure, but just based on what you know, do you see LLMs as being the future state in 3 to 5 years, or might it be something different?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably beyond my, I'm not a researcher in the LLM space, so I don't, or in the AI space more broadly. So I am probably outside of my, it's kind of above my pay grade, so to speak. But I mean, I would imagine it's hard for me to, based on what I know and my experience of it. There are people who talk about world models being kind of the next frontier of AI, and I can see that, but I still am kind of I haven't gotten a very clean answer as why LLMs couldn't be the source data for creating synthetic data for that, to create scenarios that world models could then be trained on. So I would find it very perplexing if what we have today isn't a stepping stone to whatever's next.
Yeah.
It is a new breakthrough, a new paradigm going to be necessary to get to that new location? Yeah, or to that new tier, likely. Will you're kind of referring to basically foundational models plateauing on the idea that scaling isn't going to get us more. Um, I think yeah, it's quite possible. When I think about for legal, though, I think that even if foundational models plateaued, like we're barely scratching the surface. Just in terms of like just the number of attorneys who are using it. I mean, I did see a stat that said like half of all attorneys, in firms of 500 or more are using AI, last year. Okay, well, like they used it what like, once, there's still, the amount of adoption is still relatively low. I mean, obviously it's highly unequal. Like there are some people who are using it every single day, and some firms who have really high usage. But just industry wide, it's still very we're still early days in terms of just total number of people who are using it and the value they're getting out of it. Right? Okay, somebody might be using it to proofread an email, but like that's really low hanging fruit. Like in terms of like what these AI models today are capable of doing. So from a legal AI perspective, whether the models plateau or not, like is there's still plenty of value that we're going to be able to get. I don't think the models are going to plateau anytime soon. I do think there will be those breakthroughs. It would be, I don't have any specific insight into what those will be, but like I think that given how much progress has been made, it'd be kind of silly to bet against them, to bet against like them being a breakthrough. And I mean, we're making a civilizational bet here on AI, right? Like the amount of money that's being invested in AI is probably the largest investment we've ever made as a species. And so, this is, and the payoff is potentially going to be the most important technology since, the invention of writing. It's, really exciting. And I think that even if we don't hit AGI or whatnot, I think we're going to still see incredible things come out of this. It's just, in the short term, like, it seems slow, like from GPT 4 to 5 and then 5 to 5.1 and 2, like it seems, small, but if you just zoom out, like it's accelerating. Like it really is impressive the rate of we just get used to things so quickly, right? Like, and so we're not very impressed. But you raised a number of other issues too. So I think Jevons paradox, I think that's probably right. I agree with you. Demand is certainly not infinite. I was reading an article the other day about radiology, and there were predictions really even before Gen AI, like in terms of predictive coding and of kind of traditional machine learning on X-rays. People were predicting as back as 2016 that there would be like don't go to don't study radiology, like that field's going to die because the computers are going to supplant all of that. there's more demand today for radiology than there ever has before, because simply as the cost goes down to examine an X-ray, the number of doctors who are then sending things off to get analyzed is up, right? So like there are now greater demand for radiologists than there's ever been before, and radiological services are being demanded higher than they've ever been before. And will that continue forever? Well, probably not, because nothing will. But like, I think that certainly will continue for a long time. So even in like kind of another domain, just as like kind of to benchmark what we're thinking in terms of legal, like that's a very highly specialized task that people thought was going to be automated very quickly. And what it turned out there, which I think is very relevant to legal by analogy, is that the mistakes that humans make, it just so happens that they're the kind of things that AI is really good at catching. And the mistakes that AI makes, it turns out that humans are actually really good at catching. And so, like, when you combine both humans plus AI, it's going to be better than either one on its own. There is so much demand for legal services that never gets met because attorneys are costly, right? So, I mean, obviously there are different segments of the legal market, but there are plenty of businesses where you never bother to call an attorney because even in Fortune 500 companies, because you're like, well, it's not going to be worth the point two or the point three that they're going to take, or the couple of hours they're going to bill me. So people are just running the risk all the time by not calling lawyers and not consulting with lawyers. And so once you can lower the cost of getting advice on a given question, the number of times people are going to call their attorneys is going to go up. And that's just on the kind of compliance advisory space. Once we go to the litigation space, I mean, it's kind of the game theory there is actually even more interesting because it's like, what does the world look like if everybody you were to give like an AI attorney, right? Or if there were, you were able to empower all the new law school grads, right? Because one thing is interesting is law school attendance is up at an all-time high this year, right? The
Mm.
number of people who are looking to go to law school is at an all-time high. So let's assume we have like some of the largest law school graduating classes ever. Like, what are those people going to do? Well, maybe with AI, they're going to be able to go help meet like the long tail of unmet needs of all the people out there who currently can't afford attorneys. Well, so now what does the world look like when all of a sudden everybody, or at least you've doubled the amount of people who are able to afford legal services? Well, now they're able to sue. When they wouldn't have been able to sue before, they're able to vindicate their rights in ways they weren't able to before, and that's then going to cause a massive increase in demand for defense attorneys to then defend all the companies who are now being sued by all these new AI-enabled attorneys. So, a lot of these things, the game theory of it is that as demand on one side of the V increases, the demand will go up on the other side. So I don't think we're going to see, you say 30% of associate hours can be replaced with AI. On a task level, that may be true. But it certainly doesn't necessarily follow that like you're gonna need a 30% fewer associates, or that that time won't get repurposed. And on the training thing, there's a myth, I think. There certainly is some amount of work. It's like how I learned to be an attorney and how most of the partners out there learn to be attorneys. Like they did it through grinding. But like if we're honest with ourselves, like a lot of that work wasn't productive, right? A lot of it was just a time sink. It was just a way to get a lot of hours. It was a way to generate leverage for a firm, and it wasn't necessarily something that really trained us. And in fact, it inhibits you. Like you're so busy doing the grunt work that you don't even have time to like learn the higher level skills, and so it's actually slowing your progress. And so as AI can handle more of that underlying work, you're able to then focus on the higher level tasks, both even as you're learning. And I guess the other thing too is that you know how are we going to learn or train associates? Like if it's like, if it's helping on a lot of these lower level tasks, like, I mean, the AI is clearly going to be helping us learn too, right? Like AI deployed properly explains its results, right? And it explains where it's getting its analysis. And so, oftentimes when people ask me this, particularly in law firm context, they're like, well, how are we going to train associates? And it's like, well, it presumes you do a good job of a training today. Training in law firms today is highly unequal. Not all associates get the same mentorship opportunities as others, right? It's like you're really, it's very unequal who gets access to the mentorship opportunities. And so if the AI can help us kind of bridge that gap and level that playing field where everybody has access to AI in a firm, and they can get the AI can have infinite time and infinite patience to explain how to do a due diligence, how to analyze a contract, how to write a brief. Why, when I was an associate and I would get red lines of my briefs back, like there's no explanations as to why I had made a mistake or why that paragraph needed to be cut down or moved around. But with something like Legora today, like we explain every single edit, and there's detailed explanations as to why Legora recommends that edit be made. And that's far more time and attention than like any partner would ever have. So I really think the AI is going to be, there might be some bumps along the road, but I think the AI is actually going to be used to help us train some of the best attorneys we've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree that there are much more effective methods than the traditional, legacy method that we've used to train attorneys. There are absolutely more efficient and effective ways to do it. So I think I completely agree with you there. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Kyle. Like I said, you and I have been chewing the fat on the legal collaboration space for quite some time. So it's I really appreciate you spending a few minutes with us this afternoon.
Yeah, liked it. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, listen, have a good rest of your day, and we'll chat again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks,
All right.
Ted.
Sure. Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content.